Hey, everybody. Welcome to Crew Call 4-2. This is the March 2023 show. And we're doing another Talking Heads video kind of a thing here with returning champion Gerry Schaefer, a.k.a. Hunter Hughson. He was last on, I had to look it up, October of 2020. So something tells me he's going to have a couple of things to bring us up to speed on. He's one of those guys that's a multi-talented individual, musician, as like if you couldn't tell by his background instrumentation there, and an all-around modeler and Renaissance type of guy. So definitely the kind of guy I like to have a good spirited conversation with. So welcome back, Gerry.
Thanks, buddy. It's good to see you again.
Same here. Same here. It's been a little while. You're up there in the Great White North, which is not too snow covered these days.
Not too bad. We had a bit of snow throughout the day today, but it's not too bad. It doesn't even stick around.
I plowed exactly once this winter.
You have that fantastic tractor, so I would be out with that thing all the time if I had
you
that.
Remember that? Yeah. No, listen. The first snowfall, I never mind plowing. Right? It's like cutting the grass. Like I enjoy the first 1 or 2 times I have to cut the grass in the spring. And then after a while, it's like, oh yeah, been there, done that. And plowing's the same way.
I have snow removal equipment envy, I think. I have a snowblower, but and it's funny because I live in a subdivision, and when it snows, the guys with snowblowers they'll be up and down the street snowblowing for everybody because you get a chance to use it, right?
We don't need much encouragement to use the equipment, Sure. And I went most of my life with subpar, snow removal equipment. And then when I started to get old, I thought, nah, life's too short to struggle. It's not going to get easier for me. So I'm going to get something, like the last tractor I'm ever going to need. And hopefully, and I know that sounds a little morbid, but these things last forever. Hopefully. It's a diesel.
Right. Yeah. I don't even own a tractor, so I'm jealous already.
Well, and this one has a backhoe, so it's even more fun.
Yeah.
When I first got it, I was looking for excuses to dig holes. I was digging holes for neighbors and just, hey, you need a hole dug? Because I can do it.
Yeah. My property is so small, I wouldn't be able to dig a hole without digging a hole in my neighbor's yard as well. So,
well, you want to spread the joy, I think.
Great. There you go.
So it's been a while, and I know you're the kind of guy who's always doing something. First of all, let's talk about Hindsight a little bit. Now, Hindsight your baby, Ted's baby, a joint effort? Just fill me in on that a little bit.
So it was when the pandemic started, and I think it was like March, right when things kind of went off the rails, and Ted and Ryan, it was their idea, and Ted messaged me and he says, hey, I want to do this thing. Can you help us out? And we want you to be part of it, kind of thing. And at first I thought, interesting. This is very cool. They want to do, an online RPM. I was flattered. I kind of felt like, who was it? I think it was like Neil Diamond was on The Last Waltz with the band. He was like the guy that was like, why is he here? Right. Because those two are, what I would call kind of, like really extreme, talented, high-end modeling skill guys. And also,
have you seen your modeling? Because I'm sure you're there for a reason.
So yeah, and also really like deeply knowledgeable. Like I hang out with these guys all the time. So I
encyclopedic knowledge. I know. I mean, I like to have a bunch of those friends on tap because that way I don't have to remember anything. I just ask them.
Exactly. So we did that, and that's a handy thing to have. So we did the first one in June, and it was well attended. And I mean, it was a little rough. We'd never done something like this before. We learned a lot. Sure.
What's the frequency on them? Is it?
Well, we were doing them back then. We were doing them once every 3 months or so. So we were doing about 4 a year. I think we did 5 one year.
I think I did one of them, but I couldn't tell you when.
Yeah, I think you did too. I mean,
it was the first year.
Well, think about this. We did our 15th. Wow. Yeah, 15th or 14th last week or two. Last week. And there are 10 per 10 clinics.
Right.
Uh,
And this is not like a 2 hour thing. I mean, this goes basically all day, like a typical RPM meet.
yeah. Yeah. So it starts at noon. It usually ends, most of the events that we put on are 10 clinics. And so that's 150 clinics that we did. And then we've done a few, what we call Wednesday night, Hindsight Wednesday night, right? So we've done a few of those where it's just a one-off and there's no time limit. A person comes in and presents and just talks for an hour or two or whatever.
Uh-oh, that would be dangerous for me.
Yeah. So yeah, we've done so many that, when you say, I think I did one, I can't honestly remember when it was because there's so many, right?
Right.
And
When you've done that many, exactly.
but we've had, I mean,
Do you have any sense of what a typical audience size is for it?
about anywhere from 150 to 300 is the range that.
That's right in there with all of the proto meets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although you probably have more of a geographically widespread audience, I would think.
Yeah, we learned about, we got, we were told, I guess, about our timing from the West Coast people, because they're like, you guys are starting at noon and that's what, 4 a.m. out there? I don't know. And so they were kind of like, we haven't had a chance to have lunch yet and this and that. So we had to consider that, and then
works for me because I'm not much good for anything before noon anyway.
Yeah. So, and then, once you do that, then I mean, we had people from Europe who were coming on and staying on for part, because I think it eventually, like, they stay on for the first part, I guess it would be. And then as the show progresses, it just gets too late for them, like pull an all-nighter kind of thing.
So now, are these things archived at all? I mean, is there an ability to go back to them anywhere?
No. I kind of like that.
Yep.
We've been doing that on purpose, and and when people ask me about that, I ask them to think of it as a concert.
Right.
And imagine back when we were younger, and you bought a ticket and you went to a show and you saw a great band,
right.
and then what you had for the rest of your life was bragging rights.
Right.
Like, I saw the Police in 1978, and you can say that for the rest of your life, right? So yeah, so I mean, that kind of a thing. So that's kind of the thinking behind keeping it without, I mean, we have recorded some. Ted records he's archiving his when he presents. I think he's got a YouTube channel and he's going to put them up on there.
That makes sense. So in other words, it's not the entire thing, it's just whatever you're happening to be presenting.
Yeah. And the odd person will ask us to record theirs and we'll do that for them. But, generally, like, a lot of times, the other issue too is that people will bring with them in their clinic, they'll bring images that they don't have the right to reproduce, because you might have found it on the internet, and it informs your clinic, and people do this at real world clinics all the time. And I don't really think there's a problem with that, but if you're going to record it and put it out somewhere, and now you've got photos that you don't have attribution for it, we don't feel right about that.
No, and I don't. And who needs the grief?
No, and most of the clinicians also, like, they're getting photos. Some of them are getting photos as favors from people who took them,
sure.
or so it's not always up to the person giving the clinic whether they're allowed to distribute these photos for free.
Right.
So there's that.
And when you think about all the friends we made over the years and resources and what have you, people are happy to help you, but you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean they're giving away to the universe, what they might give you based on a personal relationships. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's also important, because if you've got photos that have no attribution, it's not really productive for the historical record, because then nobody knows when it was taken. Like, if it gets out there on the internet and it just circulates around and somebody finds it, nobody knows where it was taken. Nobody knows who took it. When
I see photos all the time on the various Facebook groups and what have you. And some of it's pure gold. I mean, people are just putting all kinds of really valuable stuff out there, but probably half the time what's lacking is the date, and maybe they don't know, or maybe they didn't bother to, get it off the original source or whatever. For me, that's one of the most important things, because if you're modeling a particular point in time, which I think you are, obviously, I know I am, and there's something about the 80s. I don't know. It wasn't like the most prolific time for people to take photos for some reason. There's certain, the late 70s, that whole end of Penn Central going into Conrail, a lot of pictures then, and it seemed like when they got into the early 80s, much less available. And then maybe later on, when people had gotten used to the idea of Conrail as an example, and Conrail kind of got its act together, lots more photos available, but I really have to hunt around for what I need for my 1984 time frame,
That's
especially in my
interesting.
area.
Yeah, I never considered that. For me, I got my first camera probably 1981, maybe, and I started shooting. I shot black and white for a little bit, and then I started shooting slides, and I really only took train photos for the 80s. I think I stopped pretty much because I got real busy, right, with other life things. I
Sure.
got
Which is
busy.
very, very common in our hobby, and probably many hobbies. And then you pick it up again at some point because it's in your blood, it's in your bone marrow.
But that's just my experience, right? The Gen X experience is like, being a young adult in the 80s. And then I'd never considered that there weren't a lot of people out there shooting. I wonder why that is. Maybe Conrail was, I know that Conrail was really unpopular with the older rail fans at the time. They really resented the loss of all those fallen flags, I think.
Sure. And I mean, you can see why they'd feel like that. And I didn't understand it at the time, but once Conrail ended, all of a sudden I understood. It just, I got it. Like the steam guys that hated diesel.
Yeah, I was, it's interesting too, because I had a lot of friends, or had a number of friends. I wouldn't say a lot of friends, but I had a number of friends who were like bona fide rail fans, I'd call them, right? Like they actually knew what they were looking at. They knew how to find things, and they knew where to take pictures and all of that. And I was a bit of a dilettante. I hung out with them just to sort of, get to know what was happening. And my dad worked for
Same
CNR.
here. I had the exact same. Sometimes even hanging around with them, I couldn't figure out how they knew what they knew.
Yeah,
They just knew. They had it's they're hunters in a way. You know what I mean? The thrill of the chase.
Yeah.
And I rail fanned during those times with some real hardcore rail fan guys. My one regret is I kind of started a little bit too late. All of the stuff that I took, it's all too new for my era, and who knew? I missed out on a lot of stuff that I probably, could have been or should have been taking pictures of. But back in those mid 80s, I was actually raising someone of your. We had a little bit of an age difference here. I'm gonna be 67 in July. Hard to believe, but and my son is in his late 30s now. You know what I mean? Just to put it in in perspective. But that's interesting. So have you found that your prototype interests have changed over the years, or is it always pretty much what you're focused on right now? And we can talk about what that is.
Oh, I went through a lot of different things when I was like in the 80s. I think prototype modeling, which you and I both do, like I think that it was in its infancy.
No question.
Because it was just like there was a magazine called Prototype Modeler, and there was Mainline Modeler.
Mm-hmm.
I remember picking those up, and the first time I looked in either of those magazines, and I went, oh, these are my people right here. Like this is what I want to be doing. As much as I thought, model trains were fun and cool and everything.
Mainline Modeler was Bob Huntman, right?
Huntsman. I think you're right.
And Prototype Modeler, I think in the beginning was Jim Six.
I wouldn't know. Yeah, it sounds right though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Jim's. He was writing in RMC a lot in the 80s, I think.
Correct. In fact, how I got to know Jim was this was in like the beginning of the internet, and what the heck did they call him at that time? It was some kind of message board or kind of a thing, And I had been reading his articles, and they were just like, they were speaking to me because it was exactly what I was doing. You know, he was doing that whole Penn Central into Conrail thing. And I ended up asking him I think I posted something on one of the boards, and it was a question. He answered it, and I said, "Are you Jim Six, who writes all the articles for RMC?" And he said, "Yeah." Next thing you know, I'm going back and forth with the guy. I ended up becoming friends with him, stayed at his house a few times. We went rail fanning. I mean, you never know how it's all going to go.
Yeah.
And you get there's people that I've met maybe once at a train meet that I've been friends with for 20 plus years now. You know, you connect with, you click with whoever you're gonna click with. You know, I didn't realize at the time how mercurial Jim was, and how he would be more than willing to just get rid of something that he'd spent hours doing, because now he's got a new interest, you know, and he's a steam modeler now, believe it or not. You know, he's kind of gone back in time.
Yeah.
Ken McCory did the same thing. You know, he went from Conrail all the way back to Pennsylvania and right through Penn Central. So it's interesting how people do that. I mean, look at me. I was a early 90s Conrail modeler, and now I'm 1984, you know, but that's not going to change in my end. But it does explain why there's a couple of Jim Six locomotives running around on my layout. Because it's just, you know, there's also a Ken McCory engine running around in my layout. So these people, I think, you know, like to feel they went to a good home, and they're in use. They're in regular service.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, back then, I think I kind of, you know, tried a few things on. There wasn't a lot of product on the market. So everything, if you picked something that you wanted to model, you had to build it.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of good
develop your skill set, though.
Yeah. So I was really, you know, it was one of those things where I was, it wasn't just what I wanted to model, but it was like, what can I model? Like, what can I realistically, what can I accomplish?
Sure.
And how would I go about doing it? Right. And also, you know, I was what, in my 20s. So, and I started touring a bit, and I didn't really have a kind of home base. Right. So
maybe you're building kits and things, but not
a
much
little,
else.
yeah. I had started some things, and then it all just came up, you know, came to an end, and it all went into a box, and it came out in 2010. 20 years where I just didn't even engage with the hobby whatsoever. So when I came back, it was like, are you kidding me? Look at what's happening.
A little different from where you left it.
Yeah. So now, you know, then it was
sometimes I miss the very old days, because I'm like a builder at heart, you know. And, I'll look at an $85 Atlas announcement of a Port Tech covered hopper, and I think, really, that's where we are, you know, because nobody wants to build anything.
You can still build stuff. You have, I mean, there's the RPMs, you know, there's 300 people there building stuff. Well, at least 300 people interested in building stuff.
True.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other topic too, right? With like who is building and who is, because I hang with, you know, with Ted and Ryan and you know, those guys. So they're, you know, deeply entrenched in the RPM circle of people. So they're all builders, and they're all building stuff that's pretty astounding, right? So
my layout's far enough along that my wife was getting worried that I would run out of things to do on it. And of course I laughed and said, you don't have to worry about that. That's simply never going to happen. All she sees is that it all kind of looks, you know, presentable for the most part. I mean, there's a couple of areas left to do, but she doesn't realize that's just the first pass. You know, I will never run out of things to do on this layout.
Yeah. So, and I don't mean to imply that people who, you know, don't build freight cars or whatever, you know, are any in the hobby and to any less degree than anybody else is. It's just that there's a lot of different ways to be in the hobby now, right?
Absolutely.
And you can still build if you want to. There's lots out. In fact, I think the hobby's never been better in every possible vector you can imagine, right? Like there's resin kits now that you can get so much stuff. It might not be currently in production, but it's been produced, right? And I mean, like over the past year, I've been building some steam air freight cars that got rebuilt in the 60s and early 70s, right? So I've been kind of working on that aspect of my freight car fleet, and so I've been drawing on resin kits for that.
So let's talk a little bit about exactly what you are modeling, and maybe you know why. What about it, you know, grabbed your interest? That now I've seen I don't know if it's sections of your layout or photo dioramas. I mean, talk about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I've had a small piece of the layout, the first part of the layout built for quite a while. It's operational, you know, I can run operating sessions on it, and it's kind of the anchor industry for the layouts paper plant. A really primitive paper plant that got shut down in late 60s, early 70s, and I'm sort of stretching the truth a bit by pushing it into the sort of early 70s.
How big is this section?
It's like 12 feet long.
Okay, it's, and it's like basically a switching layout at that point, right?
Yeah. So the rest of it, I'm in the process of actually starting to build like this spring. Getting some benchwork things put together and gonna expand out more. It's gonna be a one town layout, so trains go staging to staging.
Mhm.
A really small yard to work locals from,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And then a lot of scenes kind of inspired by sort of Western New York, Buffalo, Rochester kind of area.
Now, is this stuff you saw back in the day and you decided I want to model that?
Yeah, my dad had a friend in Hamburg, New York, and we lived just across the border, and we would go visit, him often. And I did see the Lehigh Valley, in the early 70s. I do remember seeing it. At the time I was so young, I don't really, it's all just trains, right? And it's all really cool, but the name stuck in my mind.
I kind of feel that way about the New Haven. It was right here in my hometown, and I have very vague memories of New Haven U-25Bs and maybe a Jeep, but really my earliest memories are of Penn Central coming in. And I remember these brand new painted BC green cabooses that you literally could smell the paint on. That's how they were just resplendent. And I thought, wow, no clue at that time what a disaster BC would end up being.
Yeah. I think that the early 70s are really interesting to model, as that's what I model. I
Yep.
think it's a great it's not a great time historically, but it's an interesting time
Oh yeah,
for someone who's a fan of equipment or rolling stock and locomotives
right.
and the
Huge
whole,
diverse fleets.
yeah. I mean, if you model Penn Central, you can pretty much build any engine that you want, I think. Just about.
The only railroad that had a more interesting fleet than Penn Central was Conrail, because it was Penn
Yeah.
Central plus everybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And I think they had something like 5,000 locomotives to start from all the builders, and that moment in time, if you looked at that roster, you'd go, wow.
Yeah.
Nothing else ever really came close to my knowledge.
No, probably not. So that's where I'm at with the layout. I'll be building more layout soon. I really love photography, and I love taking photos of the layout.
Mhm.
And I need more scenes. So more than anything, it's that more than the desire to watch trains running around the room.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really desperately want to have some new scenes that I've been percolating in my imagination for a long time. And so I've been thinking about how to approach them, how to go about building them.
Well, I don't know about you, but until I get it in my head, I can't build it.
Yeah.
I might think about it and think about it and think about it, and then something clicks, and it's like, of course, I can build this, but that's where I have to start. I have to like see it in there.
Yeah. I also have a lot of distractions too, because um I guess it was probably just before COVID started that I started writing reviews at RMC for product reviews, right? And or it might have been just as it started or whatever. So that's been keeping me kind of busy. Like, it does take a lot of time to really examine new products and kind of figure out the prototype and figure out how close something is to the prototype. And then
Any article takes a while to do it right.
yeah.
And you've probably done what, 100 pieces at this point?
No, not that many, but I've done a lot. Yeah. And like the photography takes a long time. I take a lot of care with it. I invest a lot in, the computer to do it, to process the images on, and my camera gear and my little setup for taking pictures and of the models in a sort of neutral background. So, and I love doing that, right? So that's a bit of I don't know, I call it a distraction, but it's where some of my energy goes as opposed to building more of the layout.
Sure.
I don't
There's only
resent
so many
it.
hours in the day. People I think that I work on the layout 24/7, but um, I work in these furious bursts of inspiration, interspersed with these just fallow nothingness in between, and a lot of it's driven by business. I mean, I'm still working. I have my own IT business, and boy, when that rears its head, you can't ignore it. It just sucks up all the oxygen in the room. So I had
Yeah.
planned some, typically have like a project for the winter, and just didn't have. Actually, I did the project that was going to do in the winter in the fall. And then when I hit the winter, I just got busy with other things. I've got a new, granddaughter in Florida, and just all kinds of life things, and haven't done squat except operate the layout with, just a couple of friends here and there, and that's been very rewarding too, because for most people, I think, sure, you've got these other things about why you're building a layout. You enjoy the building of it. You want to take pictures on it, on and on and on. You enjoy making scenery or whatever. But if the whole package is run the thing and
Yeah.
run it and take some pleasure in doing it, which is not to say that people who don't are lesser. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, for me, that was always the be all and end all, except that I didn't have the faintest idea what I was doing. I knew everybody else's layout better than mine.
Yeah.
And you build this big complex system, and until you actually get it going and start running it, you have no idea if the original concept was sound or not. And the weird thing that I have found is that, for me, my layout's way more interesting to operate than I thought it would be. I just couldn't have, conceived of it, but I think there were some happy accidents there, and some prototype information that I was able to come across from some really high quality sources that I was able to incorporate into what I built in the addition and what I modified in the original layout area, that resulted in it being just way more fun to operate than I could have ever imagined. The thing that it's also a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be, because there's there's interchanges with short lines, and there's a mainline interchange, Conrail and D&H, and and trackage rights and all of this stuff. And it sounds like something maybe deliberately complicated, but it wasn't. It's basically, when you model a spaghetti bowl, you end up with some spaghetti, and that's the complexities of that can be challenging, but in a good way, So for the longest time, it was just my buddy Dave and I running the layout, and basically the thing ran at its own pace, and wherever we stopped, next time we got together, we just picked right up at that point and went on. And that way of operating, I think, was something that I became very enamored of, you know what I mean? Because rather than have to sort of do this whole big restaging and reorchestration before you can run again, you just pick up and start where you left off, Now, the more people that are involved, the less you can do that, because eventually you have to go into staging and restage a train, But basically the pattern seems to be a couple of mainline Conrail trains interspersed with a lot of locals, and then, hey, we need to run some D&H while we're at it. And then, oh yeah, what about the short lines? You know what I mean? So one of my short lines basically roams all over the place at a very, very low profit operation, and that's one of my favorite jobs, because I just kind of go everywhere on the layout. And some of it's trackage rights and some of it's their own track, but there's just endless things to do.
So are you currently scheduling larger group operating sessions, or you're just operating it with small small group?
I think that for me personally, and I don't think I'm alone in this. Mike Confalone and I were talking about this on the last podcast, actually.
Oh, that, yeah.
The days of the large operating system session are probably over, for a variety of reasons. When you have too many people, the layout owner doesn't get to have much fun that day.
Yeah.
You're just herding cats and project managing and problem solving and keeping people busy and dealing with people who are more busy gabbing than running. And if you have the right number of people, the right maximum number of people can sort of get into the job that they're doing. Layout's big enough that if it's 2 or 3 people, you can spend 45 minutes or an hour basically by yourself.
Yeah.
And that creates the feel that you're going somewhere and doing something and then returning to home base. And then sometimes there's heavy interaction with another person. Sometimes, all 3 people are, crammed into Pittston Yard trying to do their thing. I mean, it's very organic the way that it happens and non-orchestrated, which personally I enjoy because no 2 session has been the same way twice. You know what I mean? You're always like, oh, how'd that happen? We have to deal with that, just like a real railroad would have to. You have a operational scheme in mind, but when you start adding, people and variables, just never know really what you're going to get.
That sounds appealing to me. Yeah.
That's been very interesting to me. So I would say that probably just from a theoretical standpoint, maybe 5 people would be the most I think that I would enjoy having running the layout at one time. And by definition, it wouldn't be the same group all the time, although there's always some, like my local buddy Dave would probably be on most of the sessions, but maybe not all. Not everybody can make every session.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel like I have to have enough time has passed that I gotta get together another op session. I mean, we might operate 4 times in a month, and then we might not operate the next month. It's just however it goes, and that loosey-goosey kind of thing kind of works for me because I have a very, I don't want to say chaotic, but unpredictable kind of a schedule with the IT side of things. It's kind of like being an obstetrician. You know what I mean? You never know when it's time to go take care of something, so to get locked in on things is sometimes a little difficult.
I can see that. Yeah. No, it sounds, so does that mean when I come to visit, I can actually run trains?
Hell yeah.
Just pick up and start doing something. Nice.
You're really good. I mean, obviously you qualify on the territory, but the operational scheme was designed in such a way that there's not like a really steep learning curve, and the waybill system that I use, I could explain to you in 4 minutes and you'd get it, and then it's just a matter of, knowing the place names and which direction to go in. It helps if you know Pennsylvania geography, but if you don't, there's signs on the fascia, you know what I mean? So if you just head in the right compass direction, you're going to be just fine.
Nice. That's cool. And you've had it operating for how many years now? Like how many years have you been able to actually, run trains on it?
I've been running trains. So that's a complicated question because the layout has gone through so many different iterations. When I built the house, half the basement was going to be the train room and the other half was my office. Right. And then I outgrew both of those things very quickly and ended up building another building, which had my workshop and my office on top of that. And then the whole basement became the layout. Right. And I was definitely running trains with friends all during that time. But it was a very, I want to say, antiquated kind of a scheme that I had in there. And I hadn't found my prototype yet. It was like a proto freelance kind of a thing. And a lot of things weren't finished because I just had this sense of, this is not quite it, And then, I don't know, I think I just kind of stumbled across my prototype driving around in Pennsylvania, just looking for things. And it just clicked for me. You know, the interest in the area clicked for me. I do a lot of bike riding, and there was one day that on the bike ride, all of a sudden,
Ah,
I got the changes that I would have to make in order to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And I was so excited about seeing if what I was thinking on the bike ride was possible. As soon as I got back, I didn't even take off the biking gear. I just ran downstairs and grabbed the tape measure and started measuring things. And I thought, yep, I can do it. I can do it.
yeah.
And that was really when it started to be different. And then maybe a year before the pandemic, I built an addition that connected the workshop building with the house, and that added another 850 square feet to the layout. So, you know, so the whole train, with leaving out the central core, which has the furnace and, you know, all that kind of stuff, it's about 1,800 you know, square feet of layout. So once the addition was built, parts of the original layout got moved out into it, and then all kinds of connective tissue had to be created to get things running again. It took about a year of frankly very pleasant construction, and I've been running ever since.
Yeah, cool. So you told me this before that you're into biking. So is it road riding or rail trails?
No, road riding.
Yeah. I don't do road riding anymore. I'm on rail trails these days. And so when I come down that way to visit, I'm going to be looking for some rail trails to explore. And
I'm sure there's stuff that exists.
yeah.
I don't know how boring it'll be, because a lot of it is just, you know, they paved the old right of way and you're just riding through the woods, you know.
Yeah. Well, that works for me. So you're going to be you've been writing a lot with MRH, and we just talked a lot about operations.
Yep, I'm one of the Getting Real columnists for MRH. I mean, it's basically prototype modeling. That's what the Getting Real concept is. So I usually do a couple of things a year for them, and I've been doing it a long time. I couldn't tell you how many years, but you know, like double digits of years, I'm sure at this point. I used to write a lot for RMC way back in the day, and then, you know, went through kind of a hiatus on that when there was a changing of the guard there. I did do an article for RMC a couple of years ago, might be 3, and enjoyed it, you know, but again, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably well over 200 articles in print, and eventually it just kind of, you know, put your energies elsewhere, you know, and I think that's kind of what I've been doing. The column is good because it's got a schedule and a deadline, and it keeps me, you know, a couple times a year, keeps my hand in, and basically I'm writing about what I'm doing, you know, what's interesting to me and what I'm doing at that time. I think in the future, as I maybe make a second pass through the railroad and get things, you know, visually tweaked a little bit more, I'll probably do some pieces on the railroad itself, as long as, you know, the eyesight holds up and the brain holds up. You know, I mean, why not? But I'm just very interested in running the layout and working on it these days. And I'm building models and what have you. You know, and that's one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about, by the way.
Sure.
I have a piece of a roundhouse to build.
Okay.
The reason it's a piece is that the Lehigh Valley Roundhouse itself had a big fire, and about 3/4 of it in my era was gone. But there's a piece of it that still exists today. And in my era, that piece was there. Huh. And it's a pure scratch build because of what it is. You know, it's like a reinforced concrete roundhouse. Right. And I built a cardboard mock-up of it. Just to, I often build a mock-up, you know, just to kind of get a feel of how something's going to sit on the layout. And it kind of kicked my butt. Now, and I built dozens and dozens and dozens of buildings. I feel like I can build anything I want to build in structures. This one's very different. You know what I mean? This is not your usual, you know, square corner kind of a deal. This is an arc. I just found it very, very different to lay it out. And even the techniques of how you put it together are going to be very different, you know? I mean, have you ever had to do anything like that?
No, I've not built anything that isn't square. So
Right. It's a
yeah.
whole different mindset. It really is.
Yeah, I think that I'd probably have to build it in place. I, when I think about how I would approach it, I think I'd want to know where it's going to be on the layout and
First thing I
probably
did was put a piece of cardboard down in that spot.
yeah, and mock it up right in the
Yeah,
spot. Try to build it out of cardboard first,
exactly.
cardstock, tape it together, and maybe hot glue or whatever.
Yep.
And just to get my head around like what are the all the various pieces of it, turn it into, like, I guess first you build it, and then once it's successful, I would take what I've built and turn it into a net so that I have all the two-dimensional pieces that I need to make. But
I want
I
to
don't,
live with it for a while. You know,
yeah,
I put it in a spot that's been bare forever. And the minute I put it there, it's like, whoa, now that there's something there. I'm not used to that. And
yeah,
I'm just trying to get used to it being there. I want to make sure I'm comfortable with the size that I picked. Does it need to be a little smaller? You know, sometimes less is more, and sometimes you have to do what you have to do. So I can't guarantee that the way the mock-up is right now is what it's ultimately going to be. I think I'll know when I know. I'm not going to rush it. But it's like the last portion of Pittston Yard to be finished.
yeah.
And I think once it's there, it's really going to tie together the whole flavor of that whole engine terminal. And obviously I'm doing selective compression to beat the band, obviously, even though it's a 22-foot long yard, but it's a fraction of the prototype length, that's for sure.
It always is, even when you leave a lot of space. Like I've got my paper plant is 12 feet long, and it's still way compressed,
Right,
and it's a
right.
small paper plant, very,
My
very small specialized paper
my
mill.
my Mahoopany Procter and Gamble plant is it's 2/3 of an entire peninsula, and it's gigantic. It's probably about not much different than your paper plant in size, but it's hard to say exactly because it's curved.
Yeah,
The reason it's curved is that the prototype was built on a bend in the river, so the
right.
prototype is curved just like the plant is. Um, but it's probably 15% of the plant, if that's how huge the
Yeah,
facility is.
yeah,
But it's big enough to look big, and that's really what you're after.
and they were making like toilet paper or something there, weren't they? Or news? Yeah,
Toilet paper, diapers, and paper towels, I think.
yeah. So they're like cranking out a lot of paper. A lot. They were probably like a lot of carloads every day coming out of that place.
Well, in my era, they had, I think, 24 spots inside the building,
Holy, yeah,
and they would crank them out 3 times a day.
yeah.
They were
So,
they were good for 100 cars a day there between outbound and inbound. And there was a
wow.
full-time agent there, times 3 shifts, and a full-time switcher there times 3 shifts. So I mean, in Lehigh Valley days, the only customer they had that was bigger was Bethlehem Steel.
Yeah.
So that was their number 2 customer. So it gives you an idea of just how big an operation it was. I could write an article just on how the plant works.
Yeah, and big industries are really, really challenging to try to fit onto a layout. Like things like steel mills and massive like auto plants. Imagine trying to model
Right,
that. That
right,
your whole basement, you'd fill that with just one auto plant with all the first of all the size of the cars that are going in and coming out, right?
right. You need like an abandoned Home Depot to build it in.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, all these things those are aspects of railroading that they don't get covered a lot by modelers because they're challenging.
Right,
And it's challenging to pull them off, sort of like in a believable way.
right. I remember when I went to Ken McCrory's the first time, and of course he's got a truly gigantic layout. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you have the opportunity when you go down for the proto meet there, I strongly advise you to take advantage of it because it's. And I took my buddy Scott Mason there, and he just kind of walked around. And I said to him, I said, you're not going to be able to prepare yourself for what you see in there, but I looked over, I just kind of let him go in and walked away, and I saw him, he's just there.
Yeah.
Just that jaw dropped stare, because the scale of it, it's very well done. He's got a huge steel mill that he modeled, and it looks right because he's got the space to do it.
Yeah.
It would take you a while just to walk past it. That's how extensive it is.
And it should, right? Because a steel plant, like I
Goes
grew
on
up,
for miles.
yeah, I grew up in Hamilton, and it like dominates the landscape. It
Right.
is everything that the city is based on.
And complicated.
Yeah.
Tracks everywhere, different elevations, and all kinds of rolling stock. So it's such a cool industry to switch with.
Yeah, and I think as well, like if you can't pull off the full show, then it's maybe better to put it on a backdrop and have an interchange yard or something like that with,
Right. Well, Mike Confalone had done a paper plant that way, with an amazing backdrop that he created, because he's very gifted with Photoshop. And just the switching in front of a portion of the plant was what you really interacted with. And we ran that for years, and then one day he sent me a picture, and he had taken the backdrop down, and I thought, uh-oh. But basically he decided to just start from scratch there, and he's going to focus on a much larger area that he has to do a paper mill right with, and it's going to be a full spectrum mill with all raw materials in, and like logs and wood chips in, and finished product out, fully integrated mill. But it's probably I don't know, maybe a 16-foot long area to do it in, which does it justice. This other one was practically a shadow box little hole that he punched into the furnace room. So what he did there subsequently just looks right there. It's the right thing to do, but it's the last thing I expected him to do, because it was a finished scene, and a very nice scene.
Yeah, I've seen photos of that scene. I've never seen his layout, but I've seen pictures of that scene. I thought it was really well executed. I thought it looked really good.
Yeah.
So
Like what are you modeling these days? You're building all kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I'm building a lot of rolling stock these days, because it fits in well between writing product reviews and articles and that sort of thing. And also, like, rolling stock makes good articles, right? So
do trucks.
Well, yeah, as well. Yeah. So projects like that, they're kind of like bite-sized, right?
Yep.
Like they're not. One of the things that I like to do with my projects is I try to. I think that there's a niche for articles about a limited number of changes to the model that can really make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the angle that I like to take in the articles that I put together, is like what, and that's speaking of that, that's kind of the approach that I take to writing reviews as well. Is what is the potential of the product? Like, not
so you point out what else you could do with it to take it all the way.
Yeah, or not even all the way, but just take it somewhere else.
Right.
Right. I mean, the manufacturer can only do so much with a mass-produced model. They need to, first of all, pick a product that's going to sell. So it has to have a big enough appeal, right? And then they might have kind of they might have to make some compromises in order to make it work for some paint schemes or whatever. But basically they have to pick something that has broad enough appeal that people will find it to be bona fide and genuine, right? Mm-hmm. Because people will be up in arms if it's not, right? Or if you claim that it is and it's not, right? But when I look at a product, I look at like sure, it's this is what the manufacturer's done with it, but how can I make it work for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
that
I think that's a little bit of a piece of the hobby that that has been a bit, I would suggest, somewhat foreclosed upon. And I don't know if it's intentional or just accidental, because we have so much that we can buy that I think that, like, so much variety, right?
You could take a tangent car and just I cut off the trip pin and weather and put it on the layout, because it's a completed, Moloko cars are like that,
Yeah. And they're outstanding, right? Like they're
and
outstanding.
they're outstanding.
I've
Exactly.
got a rail yards model, X58. I got two of them that I built. And then the tangent model came out and I was excited about that. So I bought way too many of them. And
Same
I
here.
put them next to each other and I know which one I built and which one's a tangent.
But those rail yard kits built into a state-of-the-art looking
Yeah.
car.
Well, they're also outstanding, right? So
But to me, I guess the rail yard kits, and I've got a few left, it's great to build them just for the sheer joy of building something so well done.
well, that's the whole point, right? Is not so much what like people who are looking at it as the end product, I think, are missing the point.
Right.
Like the joy is in the building. Like how many hours of fun did you have putting that thing together? And now you can, I mean, it's one thing to say I bought this excellent Moloko boxcar and I weathered it and I put on the layout, it looks fantastic. And it's equally another thing to say, look at this resin kit that I built and put together, and it took me 20 or 30 hours or whatever it takes.
Right.
Painted it myself and weathered it. An aspect of the hobby that I think where I was going with that is I think that I think people because it's so convenient, people are building less. And then what happens is because they're building less, they don't see the possibilities in the ready to operate models that are beautiful from whomever. But you could do something else with it. I think people are missing the opportunities now. I think they're missing, what are the
That's
things
fair. Yep.
that I could do with this thing because it's close to what I need. And I think also, people are a little bit apprehensive about cutting something apart that they paid good money for. But I mean, it's my money.
No fear.
Yeah, if I want to drive it over with my truck, I'll do that, but
I feel like I can fix anything I wreck for the most part. My friend Chris Butts gave me a tangent G43 gondola that had been pretty much completely destroyed in shipping. And I looked at it, I said, it's like a kit to me. And I put it together and weathered it up and sent him a picture, and he just said, unbelievable.
That, Mike,
it was worth doing just for that reason.
The fundamental skill of building isn't so much like being a model builder isn't so much about having all these skills that you get it right all the time. It's really about having all the skills it takes to fix your mistakes, because things are going to go wrong.
Making mistakes is how you learn.
Well, yeah, you can't learn without
I learn. I just try not to repeat the mistakes,
Yeah.
So I mean, about a year ago, I went through a very enjoyable stretch of freight car modeling, and I had been looking at a lot of pictures and videos from my era, and I realized there was there were some key models that I was just completely missing, and I had to create them myself.
Yeah,
I had a lot of old branch line kits, and in fact, when I visited branch line way back in the day, Bill Schneider gave me an armful of scratch and dent stuff, and he said, "And I won't mind if you look in that dumpster over there."
Yeah.
And I left there with like a huge amount of what ended up being raw materials.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was a long time ago. A lot of the things like the ladders and stirrups and things like that they didn't age well. You know what I mean? Just you couldn't handle them. But I looked at the cars and I thought, I could build this and I could build that. I started looking in the Conrail color guide and I thought, boy, I need that car. I need that car. And I ended up creating maybe, I don't know, 18 or 20 different cars that you can't buy. And as soon as I got those cars in service, I was much happier with how the trains looked.
Mm-hmm.
Now I had everything in there that I had been missing before, and it just didn't look like everything else you see off the shelf. I had a good mix going. And it was fun just painting and decaling and getting back to to my roots with that kind of thing, and really had a ball doing it.
Yeah. And and it brings up an interesting point too, because everybody has their own sort of threshold about how far you want to take it when you're building your own thing, like a resin kit or a scratch build or a kit bash or whatever. And I find that now that we have such amazing ready to run products out there now, that I tend to want to take my projects as far. So I want the underframe on my stuff to look like something that Dave would have, come up with over at Tangent, right? So I want to turn them over and go, yep, mine's as nice as Dave's. So,
I hope they
but
never have to see the underside of mine. That means a derailment.
yeah, well, I don't, yeah, but and that's the argument too, right? Is that you don't have to do that. And I certainly, like, every now and then I do kind of enter a project thinking I'm going to cut some corners, and then I don't. It's like, no, I
Well, because
want,
you take pleasure in doing it the way it should be done.
so so
That's
when
called craftsmanship.
so there's where some of my time goes too, right? Like, I do dump a lot of time into picking away at bending phosphor bronze wire, and you know cutting things up on that milling machine back there, and all kinds of stuff like
Which
that.
one do
So
you have? It looks familiar.
it's the same one.
Is it the little? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the one that, like, it's made in China. I think Micromark sells it. I think
Mhm.
the machine shop out in California place, that I think they sell it. They just brand it differently.
Right, that's where I got mine. I
Yeah.
think Dave Hussey recommended it to me because he had one.
Well, I think the reality is that you can't get anything that sized and with that big of a table, and from anybody else. I think it's the only
Right,
one that, yeah, I mean, you could get a Shoreline, but they're much smaller.
right.
And they have that sort of, like, that wheel that you crank for the up and down feed, which is not like a real milling machine. And I think that's great for jewelry, but I'm not sure how practical that would be for me,
Right.
you know.
Well, what
Uh,
kind of stuff are you milling? Like, what are you doing that you use it for?
well, like, for instance, I'm just looking over here. I recently, or I'm working on an X29G, which is a Penzi car, that was rebuilt in the 60s, and I had to mill off the sill. So I put the thing upside down in the mill, and I
Hmm.
get a
Does a
nice,
great job on plastic, doesn't it?
right? Well, yeah, and this is a resin kit. So, I
Same
flipped it.
deal.
I started with a one-piece resin kit, flipped it upside down the mill, get it all set up. I can clean off the whole sill, nice and clean, with a perfectly straight
Hmm.
reference edge, and I don't have to do any finishing or cleaning of it, and I can start building right away.
Now,
So that's,
how are you clamping something like that? I find that tends to be the
yeah.
trickiest part of the whole thing.
A lot of it is, I can't take credit for inventing this stuff. Ryan, my friend Ryan, is he runs the machine shop at the U of T. So when I need to know how to do something, I call Ryan, and he
That's a
says,
big resource.
this is what you're going to do. So a lot of times what I'm doing is, like, I've got a really good, uh, uh, the vise that I have on the table is, it's a good square reference. So I can
Hmm.
square it. I have it nicely squared up. And then he built me this bracket, this vertical bracket. It's an L. So
Hmm.
I can actually kind of clamp, like, if I wanted to do the end of a car, I could clamp the car vertically onto this L
Hmm.
with small clamps. And then the other trick that I use a lot is double-sided tape, foam tape that's kind of thick. And yeah,
That
and,
holds it, really?
well, not just the tape, but the tape plus some clamps, right?
Okay.
And then really, really small passes with the mill. So
Right.
you're not
That's a
taking a
good
lot of
idea,
material.
though. I don't think I would have considered doing that. When I've had to do stuff on freight cars, I was experimenting at one time with removing boxcar roofs that didn't have the
Yeah,
right roof, and yeah, that's a drudgery job, to do that. And I made some wooden blanks that were the size of the inside of the car,
yeah,
so that I could clamp the whole thing in place and not worry about
yep,
squishing the car too much. But I like the double-sided tape thing. That's an interesting idea. I mean, I do mostly what I'm using mine for, frankly, is milling weights for sound installs.
yeah,
Another business I have in my spare time, but
right.
I'd be lost without it. I don't know what the heck I ever did before I got the milling machine. I think there was some very, very crude looking, sawzall cut weights in
Yeah,
the very early days.
yeah, yeah. I do a lot. I've been doing a lot of milling of frames too. Like, I've got friends in the area here who do decoder install, sound installs, and stuff like that. And so now that I have a milling machine, they'll send me the frames to do for them.
Right.
So I'll do that sometimes. But a lot, like, I'm doing a friend's Cato NW2. Those are beautiful running engines, but
That
it's a
is
lot
no
of,
trivial milling job.
Yeah, so I mean it was a whole evening on the machine with that. And so I milled out the fuel tank. I milled that out. I'm gonna put a
Speaker.
yeah, speaker down in there like a scale sounds.
Yep, that's what I
Uh,
did with mine too. I ended up deciding after I went through all of that
yeah.
that I, it's such a pain in the neck to work on that engine, and you can't test everything out unless you put it all together, and then
Yep.
you put it all together and you realize, oh, I needed to cut a wiring channel, for because I'm hardwiring the trucks and take it all apart again. I mean, it was just I got to the point where I said, I don't want to look at this thing again. And I
Yeah.
sold it to Craig Zaney down in the Carolinas and put my shell on a SW8 proto chassis and never looked back.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's like I'm doing this one because it's my friends, and I've done a couple for myself. But I mean, it would be, if I had to actually charge somebody money for this, it would be outrageously expensive
Right.
because it's a lot of time, right? And
Oh,
it's not even
and
it's
it's
I
not a
mean,
trivial, it's that, you can't go too deep because there's cavities inside and that's what holds the motor. And you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's not a trivial milling job. And if it was like really worth it, you would do it. I mean, the Cato runs great, but so does the Proto, frankly,
yeah,
that's an all
yeah,
metal chassis and it just runs great. I'm probably happiest with that switcher out of all the ones that I run. And we run a lot of switchers here in the locals.
yeah. I can't say I disagree with you. It's definitely not it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure, because it's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
It's also fun though, because I get a chance to,
It was fun for a while.
yeah, I mean it's a challenge too, right? It's a challenge, right? Can you make this work? I think I can. But what is it practical? After doing a couple now, I'd say probably not.
No, and I sent it to Craig because he's just got a thing for those and doesn't mind working on them. And he was happy and I was happy and we all live to fight another day.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
next for you? The next thing you're going to be doing is it Hindsight that's next?
We just did one last week, so we're only gonna do two a year now.
Oh, okay.
So we'll
You just
do
did
one.
Hindsight. So the
Yeah.
next thing for you is the Philly area proto meet.
Yeah. I was going to
And you're definitely not going to any RPM.
no, no, they
You're
like
on
they
tour, right? You said?
no, no, it's just a concert, but
Oh,
but they it's not a tour. I don't I don't think I can survive touring anymore.
okay.
No, the yeah, they normally have it in what, the second weekend of June and
Think it's the first this year. It
or
does
the third. So
it bounces,
oh, okay.
depending upon the holiday and how that falls.
I blocked off the weekend that I was anticipating it would be, and
Mm,
then I booked shows on the other weekends,
right.
and then it was like, I guess I can't make it now, but that's all right.
But
Um,
rumor has it you're going to be down in these parts. What is it? Sometime in August?
yeah, Michelle and I are going to come down that way and try to visit some people, ride some
Yeah.
rail trails. Try to catch up with some folks. There's some layouts. There's a lot of layouts down in that part of the world that I haven't seen. So
And you know what? They're worth seeing. If you can, I could probably put in a good word for you with a couple of my cronies. So,
yeah, cool. Yeah, and maybe we'll have to go out and have a meal or something, and some
absolutely.
beverages or something.
Absolutely. Well, unless you got something else to talk about, I think that's a good logical conclusion. I guess I'll take just a quick moment to say that to my Dartmouth Locomotive Works customers, the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm getting a massive Loxone shipment next week. So I should be able to start filling back orders again. There's been a lot of commotion around, that company, as I'm sure you heard, and a lot of
So
back and forth with the owner to get things straightened out. But
the
I
decoders are coming back in stock now. Is that what you're
seem to
saying?
be now. Whether that holds up or not, like Jurgen told me one time, he said, I'm one of the larger users of power packs because a lot of people don't use them, but almost every one of my installs has one.
Yeah.
And he said, I wish I could get you your power packs right now, but I'm not able to get a component out of Texas Instruments. And
Hmm.
until I get that component, I can't build the power packs, and it's just the way it is in in high tech these days. You know, one little thing and you can't get your product out the door. But I think hopefully they've got their you know, their sourcing straightened out, and I won't have to be my own warehouse again.
I'll have to chat with you about some decoder quirks that I'm trying to work out. We'll do that another time.
Yeah, we'll take that offline.
Yeah.
All right, Gerry / Hunter. Always good to talk with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to be here. Maybe not leave it for 3 years next time or whatever, however long it's been, right?
Well, you know, time flies when you're having fun, and I think guys like us are always having fun. At least that's what people think. We don't want that illusion to be dashed.
That's right. All right. Well, be well, my friend.
All right, same to you, and everybody else. Take care until next time.
Cheers.